time and time again. It's been relaunched like 1,000 fucking times over the past 20 years. It triples subscription revenue in the 2019 culture, and it maintains a large portion of that boon, as proven by the subscriber charts. And yet still, these developers are so deathly afraid of people playing their game. And you see this not only in the form of 200% XP and gold bonuses, but also things like rep grinds. I remember in Phase 1, each class had runes that were locked behind the new reputation tied to those boxes, and people were like, you can't grind this out in the span of a day? Nerf this crap. And that's fine. You're always going to get that from the MMO player base, but the problem here is that they did. It's just mystifying to me that people sign up to play an MMO, a genre of game defined by its time-consuming and grindy nature, and are like outraged when they encounter something that isn't solvable or completable in one day. To me, it's like having an FPS without guns, or a racing game without steering. And it's the same thing with the Sunken Temple raid. Players couldn't clear it within the first 24 hours, and that's even taking the 40 to 50 leveling into account, so it must be nerfed. You guys remember when Next Ramus came out, and 90% of the raiding guilds couldn't clear anything past the Spider Wing, and the game only grew in subscribers? In fact, it was so difficult at the time they even re-released it for Wrath on the premise that probably not even 1% of the population actually completed the raid in its entirety. I don't know, it's just like, people talk a gang of shit of how much better players are today, but I don't know. It seems to me like they're soft as my grandpa's pecker when Bob... Barker was replaced on The Price is Right, and you can make the argument that it's seasonal and it's phase-based. I get that, so there should be some increased cadence. That's fine, but here's my counter-argument. How many people are playing Season of Discovery right now? You know, the same people who cry for nerfs to rep farms and nerfs to raids, buffs to leveling, buffs to gold, are the very same people who are doing, guess what? Well, I don't know, but what I do know is that they're not playing Season of Discovery because they got their wish. Everything was nerfed and sped up so that they could earn the privilege of not having to play anymore. You know, I've said it before and I'll say it again. All games, no matter how simple or complex, boil down to the following fundamental design. You are handed problems and also satisfying ways to solve those problems. And in the case of MMOs, hardcore, casual players, whatever, every single player you see are playing for the privilege of not having to play anymore. They level so they don't have to level anymore so they can start dungeons. They do dungeons so they don't have to do dungeons anymore so they can raid. They farm honor to reach a certain PvP rank so they don't have to PvP anymore. And they do these raids over and over and over again so they get the best gear so they don't have to raid anymore. They're farming gold to buy their mount so they don't have to farm gold anymore, etc., etc. I'm not saying that you can't enjoy it, it's the entire point, but what I'm saying is that when your solution to perceived unfun obstacles is to remove them entirely, you're essentially just removing reasons to play your game. It's the developer's job to make these obstacles fun and satisfying to overcome, not to remove them entirely. And when you speed up leveling to such an intense degree, and you inflate the economy to such an intense degree, and when you nerf raids into the ground because guilds can clear them within 24 hours, you're doing exactly that. You're removing obstacles because you don't know how to make them fun. Where people could very well be leveling alts right now, they've already leveled 4. And where they could be farming gold for their epic mount, they've already got the gold for all 4 of their characters. And, you know, what's worse is that this is just surface level analysis and short-sightedness, because as the player base drops, how much pressure do you think is put on the developers to get their asses moving before people just lose interest and never return and their game dies? You know, one of the reasons why Phase 3 was received poorly, and people are going to mention this in the comments, are due to incursions. If you don't know, these are a new feature with Phase 3. You go to a variety of areas, enter a dream world, collect quests, share them with 4 other players, and do them over and over and over and over again. And on their release, they were insanely broken, The amount of XP and gold they gave was absolutely ludicrous. People went from 40 to 50 in under 12 hours, and at the same time they were able to farm enough gold for their epic mount. People made like 1,000 gold, over that probably, in this first surge of Phase 3, and it was nerfed shortly after, but not before the damage was done, and it created a massive, massive disadvantage for those who missed out on it, or maybe they knew about it and they just wanted to play vanilla World of Warcraft and quest and dungeon or whatever, but just not running the same infinitely repeatable quests over and over. But my point is that this happened because the phase was rushed out, because as Phase 2 went on and people started to quit, the developers cut corners and they rushed it out. They rushed out this broken, untested feature, and it's a problem that they created themselves because through the form of XP boosts and gold boosts and reputation nerfs, they've removed all of these obstacles, and obviously the player base are going to more quickly run out of things to do, and therefore they introduced this pressure onto themselves to push out untested content as fast as possible. So, who knows? Maybe if they didn't nerf the rep grind in Phase 1, maybe if they didn't release the XP and gold boost in Phase 2, people would actually have more reasons to play the game, and they could have taken an extra week or two to find this very glaring flaw that should never have made it to live and would have resulted in a much smoother Phase 3 launch, and they wouldn't have lost so many players. And the argument to this is that this Season of Discovery, it's not vanilla, but, again, all I need to reply to that is this. How many people are playing Season of Discovery right now? Vanilla World of Warcraft, I'll remind you, has been running successfully for the past 20 years, whether that be Blizzard, servers, or private. I appreciate the desire to add new stuff and experiment, but I think it also gets to the point where these devs are seeing flaws where there aren't any. Blizzard kind of has a history of this. On another topic, that's what really hurt Diablo 3, is that the developers looked at Diablo 2, which was a genre-defining classic, and for some reason, they saw everything as flawed and to be fixed with their superior intellect and game design, which ended up being to essentially remove any RPG elements from the game and sacrifice them for action, and what resulted was one of the worst video game launches of all time. And in the case of Discovery, aside from nerfing the dungeon boosting, I would say just leave the leveling alone, leave the economy alone. It's been going fine for 20 years. I think people will be able to survive taking more than 3 days to level from 1 to 50. I think people will be able to survive not clearing a raid week 1. I don't know. If I had to guess, I'll get a lot of pushback from that in the comments, which is fine. This is a spot where we can disagree with stuff. Just please keep it, non-toxic.
That was easy. I don't need to get any better. Og gear skal det nok. Hvis du ikke klarer den, okay. Jeg kan blive bedre til spillet over. Jeg kan også få en gear til at blive bedre til at blive mere forberedt. Og klare mig bedre på den her fight.
But if I had to guess, this pushback will be from people who stopped playing SOD over a month ago. You guys can say anything you want. I have the easy job. All I have to do is just point at the player base, or lack thereof. So I hope that Phase 4 will bring it back, but if you want to know my prediction, I think it'll be much like Phase 3. I think that there'll be big interest at first, but then there'll be a pretty big drop-off because everything is just too fast, and too many reasons to play have been removed. So yeah, rant over. Let's continue.
The recent chart and sub-count estimates that have followed in its wake, and, well, Season of Discovery came out, sub-count line goes up. It just works. There is clearly a huge demand for both vanilla content, as well as some changes being made to the game's base format that people are really invested in. Season of Discovery...
I really love MMO launches. I don't know about you guys, but there's just something about seeing this massive ball of players struggling to get out of the starting zone that's so universally memorable and fun. And I think honestly that's one of the main appeals of the genre. Even if they suck, the launch always stands out as a highlight, and I never regret playing it because it's just fun to get lost in this new world and just kind of figure out all the new stuff together.
Has also showed us that the player base has definitely changed by and large on certain topics too. Nowadays we have mega servers that can fit tens of thousands of players, not these smaller tight-knit communities that people would always go on about back in the day. Turns out on an MMO that people just want other people to play with. We have gold that's much easier to get, and it's faster to level and so on. Though some of these things do make sense given it's a seasonal server and everything. Of course,
Yep, especially if you have massive gold and level increases, as it turns out. But yeah, again, how much is too much? Taking into consideration how fast the players are today, do we really need these on top of it? What is the ideal MMO? One that's beatable within 1 week of starting? You know, why start at level 1? Come on, just start us at 60. Let's just start us at rank 14. Starts with full best in slot. I really think that's been one of SOD's biggest issues, is that they've just failed at protecting the players from themselves. I have a video about this subject, in fact. I just posted it to the channel a few days ago, so yeah, check that out if you're interested in MMO design and philosophy.
3's out now, raising the level cap to 50, and we'll see how this plays out. At this point...
Well, I think we've seen how it plays out.
Part of me does just want to get to 60 and see how our class's full toolkit is supposed to play with everything Blizzard's planned, rather than feeling as though some specs have bits missing just so we have something to get later on. But then when we're 60, we have to go back to raiding Molten Core, Nixia, BWL and so on. And the existing level 60 raids, if I'm being honest, were not my favourite. Maybe we'll get the Season of Mastery changes in the game though, and they'll be a bit more interesting. I'll give them a go either way. At Blizzard though,
Oh, they'll definitely be buffed in some way. People at level 50 are doing more DPS than full Nexramus Fury Warriors. The power creep is insane, so unless they want these raids to feel like a stockades carry, yeah, the health, damage, armor, probably mechanics are going to be a requirement. And that's probably a big reason why the level 60 phase is taking so long.
But they've got more than enough to do on the Classic team, between getting Cataclysm in a state where it's working, as well as developing new stuff for Season of Discovery, and actively having to work on things such as class balancing on a regular basis. I would still like to see a standalone Classic server that adds new content into the game one day. Season of Discovery is definitely...
I agree, and I like Season of Discovery. Hopefully this video doesn't give you the wrong impression. If I didn't like it, I wouldn't care, and I wouldn't talk about it. I do. It's been fun. But I think at this point, if you forced me on a desert island with one MMO, it would be original vanilla. A lot of that is nostalgia, for sure, but there's nothing wrong with that. I don't know why drawing nostalgic value from World of Warcraft specifically is stigmatized. I think that there's nothing wrong with loading up Mario on the NES, or cooking the same recipe that your mom did for you when you were a kid, or watching a movie you watched a lot as a kid. I don't see why you can't do the same with vanilla World of Warcraft, especially when it's proven itself in modern culture to be appealing time and time again. I don't know, it's so funny. I still get comments from people today of rose-colored goggles. It's like, you realize this game tripled subscription revenue, right? You've seen this chart, I am sure. So exactly what point are you trying to make when you say rose-colored goggles to dismiss classic MMO design? Classic carried World of Warcraft during this time. I guess for me, I would definitely be more interested in a more grounded Classic Plus with no XP increases, no gold increases, and the old balance with maybe some tweaks here and there, so it's not just Fury Warriors as DPS, but still kind of keeping that charm and simplicity that the game has, and maybe just going for new stuff like high gel that he's showing here, and bosses that are still difficult but yet pretty simple, maybe on the level of Nexramus in terms of complexity and challenge in the next raid tier, but you know, obviously harder than Nexramus too.
The closest we've got to a real Classic Plus experience so far, and given its success, I expect to see more to come in terms of modified vanilla content. But changing that commitment from seasonal to permanent is a big undertaking, and not without its own risks either. On seasonal servers, they can massively increase XP gain, give us Wrath of the Lich King and beyond abilities, and just make us all feel overpowered. And it's not, in many cases, how the game usually is with the pacing of vanilla at all. But we can just brush it off and say, yeah, but it's seasonal, so whatever, just have fun with it while it's here. Would see.
Yeah, but again, and I know that this video was put out when Season of Discovery was thriving, but this is where that philosophy gets you. People stop playing your game because you've removed reasons to play your game.
Season of Discovery had been as well received if it was presented as a full-on standalone Classic Plus server. Maybe not. But there are another group of players too, those who aren't on expansions, and those who don't really want all these changes to the original Classic format either, and those are the people still on Classic Era. In case you don't know, Classic Era were a bunch of servers made when Vanilla was progressing onto TBC, and the idea was it was a place for people who prefer the vanilla version of the game to still have a home. And to this day, it's just Vanilla that has received the Era treatment. TBC did not get Era servers, and there appears to be no plans for Wrath either, and time is running out. And at first glance, it's not hard to see why. Classic Era was a disaster when it first came out. The servers were dead, and not in an exaggerated sense either. They were dead. There would be
Yeah, it was sad. I think a part of the reason for this was Blizzard putting out a $40 charge on copying your character at first. Well, let's see if he mentions this, but yeah, at least when BC Classic was fresh, it was a ghost town. But it was expected at the same time, especially if you're going to charge people $40 to carry your character over, and it's absolutely ridiculous. Small indie game dev, by the way.
a handful of people online, if that, and auction houses at times had 0 items on. But it's grown over time. People have gone back to their old characters or sought to re-level in the old world without any new additions.
I'm one of those people, actually. I've rolled on the recent community fresh run on Deviant Delight for the US. If you're an EU player, there's apparently one on Zandalar Tribe. I think at this point, the itch for vanilla is big enough that if they were to do an official fresh server, it would see moderate success. Nothing like the 2019 launch. I'd be surprised if they were able to reach that level again, but moderate success. I think that maybe every 3 to 5 years is a sweet spot to where this itch starts to come back for most people. But my guess is that they're probably going to wait until Discovery concludes, and I think that would be best as to not splinter the player base so much.
Not a huge population, to be honest, but it is consistent at least. And most importantly is the era ended up serving its purpose, being a home for those who want a no changes classic. It just took a while for people to start missing it enough. And you know what? Hardcore servers would have never happened if Classic Era didn't exist. By the time...
Yep, true. And I'm gonna be a hipster here. I did hardcore runs before it was cool. No, seriously, people can vouch for me. I started doing them in the beta of Classic before it was even released in 2019, which didn't have high stakes, of course, because it was a beta and everything was going to be wiped anyway. But then, and also a little bit before BC came out, I was recording a run, and I was going to make it into this mini-series with like full RP narration. I was going to have it voiced over by Wayne June, who did the narration for the Darkest Dungeon. I made it to about level 30, and that's when they announced that they're not bringing the level boost to BC, and I kind of nerd raged, as you know. But yeah, Hardcore actually ended up being what brought me back when the official servers launched in August of last year. That took me out of my hiatus.
And the hardcore scene started to get really popular. We were in Wrath of the Lich King. Would people still have wanted to go back and play a hardcore game mode on Wrath servers with all the class and open world changes? A few perhaps, but it was that legacy of having challenging vanilla leveling that made people want to go back and undertake the challenge. And hardcore ended up being a pretty huge deal for a good few months. There's still a scene for it, of course. It's not like it's ever too late to start. And one day it'll probably have a resurgence because it's just always going to be there. And I've seen the odd sentiment here and there start to crop up about people missing TBC as well now. We're getting to that point where time has now gone by, but unlike vanilla, they can't go back. TBC's gone. If a big piece of Classic is re-releasing and preserving older expansion experiences, why are we once again leaving them in the past? That doesn't quite add up to me. And Wrath is soon to get the same treatment in having no Era realms. By the way, Icecrown Citadel came out over 5 months ago and still has about 175,000 active raiders. If 10% of those people carried onto a Wrath Era server, it would have the same raiding population as Classic Era. And I don't know whether Blizzard doesn't want another hosting dead server situation. it being logistically difficult to offer different expansions or whatever it is, but it seems
Men det var sådan lidt... Problemet da I lavede... Der var 20 Classic servers, og da I så lavede Error, så lavede I 20 Error servers, fordi alle skulle have deres egen server. Der må sige, okay, måske skulle vi bare lave 4 Error servers, og gøre det samme med TBC. Der er 20 TBC servers, vi laver 4 TBC servers, eller 1 eller 2 servers.
seems as only vanilla is the expansion, or version of the game I should say, that's carrying on and on. And no, I don't think segmenting the player base is an issue here. These error servers are a niche thing to begin with, and for Blizzard, a sub is a sub. You might spend different amount.
I think that maybe a good middle ground would be official reruns of what we've seen so far in the 2019 line. I think he's right. Just enough time has to pass for people to get the itch to play all of these different versions. So, you know, let's say Cataclysm is the end, which who knows if it is, but just using this as an example. But once it ends, after a few months, fresh vanilla servers are launched, and from there they follow the path of 2019 to today to, you know, going through each expansion, maybe speeding up the cadence to where this happens every few years or so. I don't know, let me know what you think about that.
Lots of time in different games doing different things, but somebody who subbed for Plunderstorm and somebody who raids Nax 40 on Classic Era are both subscribers. Overall though, despite me thinking as though the first 3 versions of WoW felt like a trilogy, keeping on releasing future expansions is kind of the point of Classic in the first place in many ways. I reckon we get to Legion eventually, but I'm sure there is a longer term plan, because at the end of the day, we're revisiting expansions at a faster pace than they're releasing. And over time, I think we're gonna keep speeding up. Classic Era...
I really wonder how far they'll go. Will we see a BFA Classic? I don't know. Cataclysm I can see people wanting to revisit again, but I haven't seen anybody say, oh, I really miss gathering Azerite. I don't know, maybe enough time hasn't passed yet. My original guess was that they would have ended with Wrath, since that's sort of the original trilogy, Vanilla, BC, and Wrath, but I'm thinking Legion would probably be the end now at this point, but who knows. If there's money to be earned, they'll go as far as people want to go, honestly. I think it really just depends on how Cataclysm does, if they'll do Mists. But if you force me to guess right now, because we saw Cataclysm, yeah, we'll probably see Mists.
Is an idea which I think works just eventually, and it's a bit of a shame to not see it for TBC or Wrath. I wouldn't play them personally, I mean even for Classic Era, outside of Hardcore I didn't really play it, but I think there would be a niche player base for them. I hope Season of Discovery and Hardcore as an alternative game mode have both made big impressions on Blizzard. Vanilla is the game with the biggest reach by a huge amount. It's the only pre-expansion version of World of Warcraft, and as such we can add content which builds on what exists, rather than releasing expansions and replacing everything. Though I am still hoping for something more permanent one day. Seasonal is a great testing grounds to see what works, and I've been super happy with it so far. I think given all the choices we have at the moment, Classic is doing just fine though, and outside of error servers not existing for old expansions being a bit of a shame, the future of Classic is looking very interesting. But those are just my thoughts at the moment and a few bits and pieces which I felt like talking about today. If you made it to the end, let me know what you think about the overall state of Classic in the comments down below. And thank you all so much for watching and listening in, and I'll see you on the next one very soon.
Very good, Willie. I think it's fascinating looking at where we were and where we are now. From no changes to druids with Wind Fury and hunters with Blessing of Kings and level boosts and WoW tokens. It kind of makes you wonder what things will look like in 5 years from now. Who knows, maybe we will be playing BFA Classic. So we can heal Azeroth's wounds, champion. Go do yourself a favor and subscribe to Willie. He's one of my favorite channels on here. I'm sure we'll revisit more of his stuff in the future because I think he always has interesting things to say about the game, and I definitely appreciate the patient and nuanced way that he has in delivering it. Let me know what you think about all of this, but aside from that, like the video if you liked it, because I'll see you in the next one. Peace.
Farewell for now, mortals. We hope you enjoyed today's video. So we have 2005 Warcraft raid design. This is a panel done in 2009, maybe? Well, it was uploaded in 2014. I don't know when this panel was actually done. The video looks like it's quite old. I guess it doesn't really say. But this is 2005 Warcraft design, so let's take a look. I guess the panel's 2005.
So we'll start
too,
off
okay.
with the definition of a raid, because it's PowerPoint and we gotta be corporate. And no, I'm just kidding. The dictionary defines a raid as an entrance into another's territory for the purpose of seizing goods or valuables.
I mean, hey, that's pretty good.
So we know exactly why you guys are raiding. Don't think for a second that we're ignorant to that.
Fat loot,
For
baby.
today's discussion, when we talk about raiding, we're talking about
I love
large
this.
groups encountering tough NPCs at the end game. So let's talk about end game content and why that is important. We don't have experience loss in World of Warcraft, and heat only rises. All of our player characters, anybody who buys World of Warcraft and starts playing, they're only gonna level up. We also have to give players something to aspire to. There's a lot to be said for that moment when you're sitting in Orgrimmar as a newbie and somebody runs through in like all raid gear and you're like, wow, that guy must be so powerful.
Yeah, we talk about this all the damn time. I talk about this every single day. Like, that's why it's important to have someone with elite 2200 shoulders running by in Stormwind City, because when you look at it, it gives you a reason to play the game. Because you see them and you're like, damn, that guy's cool. Inspect those shoulders. Holy crap. Only 1% of players have that. I want that. I gotta get good. I gotta play more. It keeps me excited. Wow, that guy has full elite gear, heroic gear, top tier rating gear, Nax gear. Whoa, I haven't seen that before. That's super cool. Only 1% of players have that. I got to aspire to that. It's important to have it, man. You can't take that piece out, you give everything to everyone, and then it's like, well, okay, well, I've done everything. I cleared all the raids. I'm gonna quit now. There's nothing keeping people going. Like, you gotta, like, that's very, very important. Yeah.
Or eBay or something.
Wait, what did you say?
Or eBay or something. Anyway, the world feels something.
Okay, or keeps me single.
There's a lot to be said for that moment when you're sitting in Orgrimmar as a newbie and somebody runs through in like all raid gear and you're like, wow, that guy must be so powerful.
Yeah, we talk about this. I got as here players have, and you can't. Okay, well, people.
Or
like, that's very, very important. Yeah.
Or eBay or something.
Wait, what did you say?
Or eBay or something. Anyway, the world feels a lot bigger for everyone if there's unbeaten content out there. Even if you're the guy who's like level 30 doing a Wrathy Highlands quest, but you know that the resident Uber guild of your server is, you know, trying to kill Nefarian, it creates an epic feel for the whole world.
Yes. We talk about this third point all the damn time as well. It was really cool in vanilla. When I played vanilla, I never cleared Nax. I never cleared AQ40. I killed Onyxia, Molten Core, AQ20 in ZG or Summa ZG. I never got to AQ40 in Nax. But having content that I never got to kept me playing. If I cleared all the raids, I would probably just want to quit. But the reality is 99% of people didn't clear all the raids, so 99% of people had a reason to keep playing the game because they haven't beaten the game, because they haven't cleared all the raids, so they wanted to keep playing so they could get better, so they could beat the game. 99% of people, I don't think, really killed, cleared Black Temple and killed Illidan. How many players killed Illidan? Like, I know I didn't as current content. Sunwell. No way. Right? But that was that unbeaten boss. That unbeaten boss for most people kept you kind of hanging on a little bit, right? Same thing a little bit in Wrath. That unbeaten boss, Lich King. How many players killed Heroic Lich King? Right? It's like that unbeaten content felt really good. I guess Wrath is a little different though, because it's a lot of people probably killed normal Lich King, which I think was still kind of hard, but Heroic obviously was a whole nother thing. Right. But that was a little different because then they swapped to normal Heroics. Anyway, that's very important to have that unbeaten content that's like scary and it keeps you excited, and that like one guild on your server is trying to do, and when they do it, it's a big deal and you can rally behind it, and it's like, oh, I need to get good so I can eventually do that, right? Very, 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 very smart.
How come there aren't any low-level raids? If you ever want to raid something at low level, you could just try something that's higher level, but there's no real point to us creating this raid content that's going to be trivialized by levels anyway. I'll never raid. Why should I care about raid content in World of Warcraft? Well, we hear this all the time, and then people end up contradicting themselves. They actually end up raiding. So a lot of people say, I'll never, that's not something that I'll ever do, and then they'll get into that like one Zul'Gurub raid and go, that was so much fun, I got this awesome item, it's actually something I want to do. I told everybody yesterday about my mom. She had never played a video game before, and then I got her into our friends and family alpha thinking she'd load it up and go, oh, the graphics are pretty, you know, is that what you do? But she actually started playing the game, and she got pretty good at it, and now she has 2 level 60s and a level 50 that she's like on the way up with that one.
Holy crap.
And she plays Horde, by the way, so she's... so my whole point is that people who said that they would never engage in this sort of thing might one day find themselves doing it. She gets invited to Molten Core raids all the time. So there's what I like to call the 1% myth. Why do you create content for 1% of your population?
We talk about this all the time and why it's important. Give it to us, Jeff.
1% is such a convenient number, just pulled out of thin air. Our server programmers, Joe Rumsey and Brian Gibson Winge, provided me with some statistics. They're able to log everything. So every night at prime time in the US, there are 500 Molten Cores with 15,000 players. 150 Onyxias with 2,500 players, 250 Blackwing Lairs, that's 6,000 players, and 700 Zul'Gurub instances with 10,000 players. But I like to point out that most raiding guilds do Onyxia once a week, and they do Molten Core one night a week. So this is different groups that you're seeing on a lot of servers. We will see 500 to 700 people in Molten Core at prime time every night of the week. So there's a ton of people. On the weekend, like right now, there's going to be 35,000 people in Molten Core and Zul'Gurub. So 800 of those Molten Cores and 700 Zul'Gurubs. The night Zul'Gurub went live, I think we had 20.
Is it Zul'Gurub? I thought it was Zul'Gurub. I mean, Jeff's probably saying it right, but like, I never knew it was pronounced that way. Maybe I'm wrong. Who
Det var
knows?
dengang, da Legends var unge, og de selv programmerede og var game director på det andet spil. Inden de blev promotet så langt op. Inden at stjernerne af spillet blev promotet så langt op. De er ikke længere rødspillere, bare managed. Og så er det nye på.
300 instances of it running just during prime time. That's like a 2-hour window. So Onyxia was the first raid encounter that we implemented. I took a picture of her on her birthday, right there. It's right after she got placed. It's a placeholder model. We didn't have the final model for Onyxia at the time. So it's, I think, August 12th at 11:30 p.m.
Oh my gosh.
So we wanted to break this.
Sjovt, at den første, så fordi der ikke var noget raid, og den første raid boss, så lavede en super lang quest chain for den lå.
Standard raid mold with her. We wanted to make her a really compelling encounter. So here's some of the things that we did. We concepted a 3-stage encounter. Stage 1 is the introduction. There she is sleeping, and you know, you see her and your guild charges in, and your main tank better turn her quick enough, or you know, that guy you want to kick out of the guild is in the whelps, and And just kick the guy out already, you know?
Dude,
He's
Jeff
just
is hilarious.
absorbing loot. Anyway, so then, you know, we thought it was cool. You're fighting on Nixia. Oh, wow, she looks awesome. We're all in the right place. We wanted to mix it up. Let's have another stage where everybody changes roles. So, and also it was like this challenge to us, like, can we make her fly? And we did. So, Onyxia flies. And then stage 3 is the all hell breaks loose stage. And that's where everybody better do the right things at the right time. So kind of like the grand finale. When we're making a raid encounter, we sit down and constantly ask ourselves, what is each class doing?
Isn't part 3 on Onyxia just the same as part 1? Pretty much. You just, it's the transition, she lands, and then you just tank her, and then it's just the same thing. Yeah, I guess there's fearing, and then the lava comes up, but it's pretty
Fear og lava, og du har lækker. Du kan ikke
much the
styre
same thing, I guess.
Right now. If I'm a druid, what am I doing? Am I healing? Is there something for me to hibernate? If I'm a rogue, am I going to get ripped apart by the AE? If I'm a warrior, am I single tanking this or off tanking? We have to ask ourselves, what is each class doing? We never want to approach a raid from too far back and too big picture that we forget what it's like to be an individual player at that encounter at that time. So we also try to mix things up, and I think Onyxia is a good example of that, or like the Razor Gore encounter. We don't want everything to be like this 30-minute snooze fest of, okay, here we go, everybody start doing DPS and healing, and that's all you're going to do for the next 30 minutes, because there's just nothing interesting about that. And we also don't want one boss to feel just like the next boss. So if you look at Molten Core, you know, compare Magmadar to Lucifron. Within any raid dungeon, we also want the fights to feel very different. We don't want them to all feel the same. So we always have a duration in mind before implementing an encounter. Sometimes we come close to hitting these durations, sometimes we're way off. As an example, for Valenstraws, our whole vision for that encounter is that it would be a 2-minute fight. Or actually 3 minutes is the real timer, because then you're screwed. But so pacing is important in these fights. We don't want it ever to feel like something is dragging out. And if it ever feels like that, then we've done something wrong and we need to go back and fix it somehow. We want to challenge the players so they feel a sense of accomplishment. This is a real tricky one. You can turn that knob of difficulty up on the players. If you ratchet it up too high, it creates a lot of frustration on the player base. We try to make it challenging, but not too challenging at the same time. And then we constantly want to raise the bar on ourselves. And what I mean by this is come up with new encounters that we hadn't done before. So like in our dungeons, we come up with guys like Arcadus, which is this awesome Titan who's, you know, bringing guys out of stone form all around the room. And then we get to our raid encounter. It's like we have to do something a little bit more than that. This slide I call SMART. This is to address a lot of things that always comes up on the boards. How come you guys don't make a smart raid boss? Wouldn't a smart raid boss kill all the healers first? Okay, for 1 second, pretend that you play a priest. And let's pretend Onyxia is so brilliant that she's figured out somehow to kill the priest first. So your raid charges down into Onyxia's lair, and bam, 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 all your priests are killed. Did that somehow make the encounter more fun for anybody at that point?
People would just not invite priests. They would just invite paladins. You know what I mean? Like, it would be like, all right, we're not taking any priest to Onyxia anymore. All right, we learned our lesson last week.
Everybody always likes to play the realism card, you know. Well, of course I would kill the priest if I was, but
Det er jo det, den der elle, den var, der kan du få lov til. Fuck dig, altså. Jeg skal nok dig. Du bliver healet op. Jeg skal finde den healer der hen og nok healeren.
You know, there's not really dragons at the end of the day, and, you know, they don't walk around with like helms of wrath stashed under their wings. So, you know, sometimes you got to do stuff to address gameplay. I like to say that killing players is easy. So I think Jeff, if he wanted to, He could kill you in any way that you could possibly imagine. He could kill the druids by mind controlling the priests and having them kill the druids if he wanted to. And then Scott could send you to Thousand Needles, kill you, and break all your gear. You know, we have amazing tools. It's not like we're limited by technology. We could kill you anytime we want, like in the beta. That's Magmadar and Stormwind, and those are real players. So that's, yeah, we could put everybody. We could put Ragnaros in Razor Hill. I think we did that. Nobody still to this day knows who put Ragnaros in Razor Hill, but he was there. So that's Magmadar in Stormwind. So killing players is really one of the easiest things that we can do. It doesn't even take a lot of thought. You know, we can be really non-creative and just, oops, you know, cleave, but for 8 billion and everybody's dead. So the point is, it's not like it's us against you guys. We're not trying to, like, Nefarian's not our baby and don't kill him. We put him in the game so you'll kill him, you know? Like, we want you to kill our raid monsters. We put loot on them because we expect you to kill those things. So you have to get away from this assumption that we have to have content that we just don't want the players to beat. We want you to beat our encounters, but we want the encounters to challenge you in a fun and creative way. We want you to, as players, to walk away and say, we really had to work on our strategy. We didn't get it on the first try. You know, maybe we didn't even get it on the first 2 weeks of trying, but we were able to, you know, unify as a raid and beat this thing. So challenging players in a fun way is the designer's challenge. That's what we have to come up with.
Cool.
So this brings us to our next slide. These are raid creatures and who kills what the most. In one day, Valenstraws killed 24,000 people. And then you have the Bloodlord with 11,000 people and Fire Maws at like 10,000. And I threw some other stuff in there, like on the low end of the scale is the Rizashi Adder. That's like one of the snakes in Zul'Gurub. 4,000, the Firewalker, which is just funny. Like,
I'm surprised Azurgos has that many.
I love watching people pull those, you know? Like, make the Paladin pull the Firewalker. I'm serious, too. It's like, anyway. As comparison... The Gadgetzan Bruiser is weighing in there, so maybe we should put purple loot on that guy or something. He's earning his keep goblin style. Also, the Defias Pillagers. I like to point out that the Alliance is not easy mode. Anybody who's been level 14 in Westfall, yeah, it's hard, man. Moonbrook, they're like, you see 4 of them start at once, and you're like, oh god. Sentinel Hill. So even with the best individual skilled players, and you put us all together in the same raid at Blizzard, and we suck. We are a great player. We made the game. We made the encounter. We know the strat. We have awesome loot, but we don't play together like every day like you guys do. And we also, you know, we don't care about like DKP and all of this. We're not looking.
So they're a bunch of noobs.
When we engage a raid encounter, you'd be surprised at what a psychological difference that makes on a raid. So as an end result, we suck when we...
I love that he just says it. He's not trying to shy away or anything. He's just like, yeah, we suck.
We play as a raid as a whole, and we spaz out and we die like crazy. Oh my god. We had that one guy we're trying to do Hakar. We're testing him. And we know the strat. Jeff made up the encounter, and Jeff's telling us what to do, and he's like, all right, guys, just don't remove, you know, the curse, whatever you do. And this dude is just spamming, you know, and he's like, when we want the curse removed, we can't get it removed. But this one time, there's a guy, just everybody stripped of it. Dude. Sometimes things occur on production realms that cannot be simulated in-house. So a lot of the testing that we do is not actually on a production realm, but on our own personal servers. But so then we try to test it on the PTR too, and I'll get to that in a little bit. So a lot of players wanted a Blackwing Lair kept off the PTR. So players wanted the sense of competition, and Lair kept
Så i stedet for i dag, hvor alle skal ind, og vi skal PTR, vi skal teste, vi skal flawless strat, så første dag de kommer ud, kan blive one-shot alle bosserne. Zero deaths. Så sådan lidt, nej. Hold med
Kept
PTR.
off the PTR. So players wanted the sense of competition and surprise revealed by keeping Blackwing Lair off the PTR.
Wow, it's a conversation we still have today, 20 years later, with how much a PTR should actually reveal. Because if you have everything on the PTR, it's like, well, it's already old content by the time it's released, right?
So we did that, but we felt like ultimately the zone was not tested as thoroughly as it needed to be, and it suffered for that. And for that, we apologize. We make mistakes. We never claim that we're infallible, and we learned from that. So as all of you guys know, we followed it up right away with Zul'Gurub. We put it on the test server, and we feel like it was a pretty solid zone when it came out. Relatively few bugs there. WoW was in alpha/beta.
It's like if you have the PTR, you can smash the bugs, and when it's released, there's less bugs. If you have a PTR, if you don't have a PTR, right, there's going to be way more bugs, but it's going to be unknown. So there's pros and cons, right?
For over 1 year, and our current patch turnaround cycle is somewhere from 3 to 8 weeks, and this includes development and testing. That's a really short period of time. WoW was so polished when it came out, the 1 to 59 game, because we had a long time to work on that content and make sure it's solid. Well, you take something like a zone like Blackwing Lair, under tremendous demand from the player base to get it out as quickly as possible, and it sort of puts an extra burden on us to make sure that, you know, we get extra testing or whatever. I just want to remind everybody that these patch cycles are extremely fast compared to normal development. So sometimes that causes us to let a bug here and there slip in, and we try to fix those as quickly as possible, obviously. I'll just finish up with looking at the big picture a little bit.
Dude,
Our goal
in 2005, he has a screenshot of Karazhan. So it was supposed to be in vanilla, huh?
is to have enough content to
We're
keep a
finally gonna get
full-time
it.
raiding guild busy each night of the week for a week.
That is a lot.
For the expansion, we want to deliver a menu of raid content. Kind of the way that raid content has worked out so far in WoW has been very linear, and we feel like this causes a lot of problems. And then finally, bigger is not always better. What I'm talking about is raid size. Even hardcore raid players, and I know lots of them, and
Okay.
I am one myself, appreciate a smaller raid.
Yeah.
Adding more people to
Yeah.
a raid does not make it better somehow.
I agree. Like, I really appreciated in SOD Phase 1 and 2 that we had 10-man raids. Like the 10-man Nomergons and 10-man BFDs, and then even in Kata, like I've been really enjoying 10-man heroic raiding. Maybe it's just me, but I like it so much more than 25-man raiding, or of course more than 40-man raiding. Like I love the 10-man aspect. Yeah, maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm just a casual or something, but I think it's great.
Karazhan var et godt raid. Problemet er, fordi det var det første raid, så gik alle folk, der lavede guilds optimeret efter at lave et godt 10-mans raid. Og de blev skudt på 25. Og 25, det er jo bare 2 10-mans raid. Men du skal kun bruge 2, måske 3 tanks til et 25-mans raid. Og du bruger 3 tanks, men Karazhan skulle bruge 2 tanks, så du skulle bruge 4 tanks. Du skal have nogle til hul med. Og så skal du også have 5 ekstra spillere der.
When I'm in a 25-man call, it's like a Zoom meeting, dude. Like, it's just like all right, clear comms, like whatever. Like 10-man's just like fun. I don't know. I like it.
all it does is make us turn to math to go, okay, we've got to ramp the DPS up, and then they've got to ramp their character, you know, power up, and it kind of does this whole inflation of the game that's not necessary. If we can keep raid sizes smaller, each individual who shows up counts for more, and their decisions feel more impactful. It's much cooler if each person in the raid can feel like they're contributing to something, rather than, you know, okay, Jeff is DPS, Steven is healing, you know, Alex is more DPS, Scott is healing. Like, we don't want it to be a numbers game. We want every individual who shows up on your raid to feel like they matter. So that's what I mean by bigger is not always better.
Well, yeah, that's why, like, in 10-man raiding, you feel like you have a massive role, but so does everybody. No one can really drop the ball. In, like, a 40-man raid, it's like, all right, Jimmy died again. It's like, all right, just res. Actually, don't even res him. We'll save our B-res. You know, it's like, whatever. Whereas, like, in the 10-man, it's like, it's kind of dialed. I like that. What a great video. I don't know who, someone linked this to me. I think it was one of my friends in Discord. Crap, I can't remember. Hey, someone linked this to me like a week ago, and I forgot about it till just now. I'm trying to give credit to who linked it to me. I don't know who it was. I don't remember. It was like a week ago or something. What a great video. What a great watch. Thanks for linking it. It was me. I don't know. You can, first of all, I like Jeff a lot. He's hilarious, but you can feel the passion, and a lot of these early game decisions had a lot of intention behind them. It wasn't a mistake. It was like, there was a lot of intention behind these choices, right? Obviously the landscape has changed. It's 2024 now and things are different, but yeah.
Ladies, you have to stop speaking about unrealistic beauty standards. You've created a shitstorm for men and women. Hear me out. Just like feminists, the body positivity freaks won. I can't find clothes anymore. Ever heard of vanity sizing? It is a psychological trick that a lot of brands have been using to create brand loyalty. Like, take this example. A 36 waist in Old Navy pants is in reality a 41. I'm 100 pounds. I typically wear a size extra small. And over the past few years, I literally have to get my clothes custom fitted, which usually costs more than the item itself. And that is if I don't want to shop in the children's department. My healthy body has been outcast because someone else needs to feel validated in their Twinkie addiction. Vanity sizing is also present in men's clothing, but not nearly as much. Instead, now when men go shopping, they see frail soy boys who look like they haven't touched a weight in their lives and look like every birth control dependent woman's dream. I mean, just look at this Abercrombie 2010 versus 2024 model. And then we have women going to the Victoria's Secret website, and no wonder women are so miserable and men are so confused. Ladies, you have to stop speaking about
On March 18th, 1965, cosmonaut Alexei Leonov successfully completed a historic 12-minute and 9-second spacewalk in the emptiness above North Central Africa. The rest of his mission didn't go so smoothly. A cramped Voskhod spacecraft and overly inflated spacesuits caused a 46-second delay in reorienting the ship's center of gravity during its re-entry. This delay meant that Leonov and his comrade had to land almost 250 miles from the intended site, right in the middle of the vast Siberian wilderness. After his rescue from 2 freezing nights in the bear and wolf-infested forests with a broken heater and a 9mm pistol, Leonov would go on to lobby the Soviet space program for the creation of this, the TP-82 survival pistol, a sawed-off, triple-barreled shotgun flare gun machete combination, something to ensure that no cosmonaut landing in a frigid taiga would ever have to worry about a half-ton bear during mating season ever again. Cosmonauts reportedly carried these weapons into space and back for over 25 years. The idea of astronauts carrying guns into space is oddly compelling. It approaches our sci-fi vision of the future. A future filled with warships and jetpacks and ray guns, which the Soviets also developed but never deployed, as a matter of fact. But given the realities of how objects move in space, should guns and other weapons, like those cosmonauts carried past the Kármán line for a quarter century, like those spacefarers of the future might carry and spaceships might shoot, should these be illegal?
Now entering the facility.
We are considering this question today because I recently had the great pleasure of interviewing a true sci-fi Leviathan. I wanted to ask them what readers and watchers question the most in their critically acclaimed and award-winning sci-fi series. Of course, I'm talking about one half of James S.A. Corey, co-creator of The Expanse, a friend and fellow hair enthusiast, Ty Frank. Now, if you know me, you know I'm something of an Expanse evangelist. I've told most of you to go watch the show because I think it's the best show on TV right now, and it's certainly one of the best sci-fi stories of this generation. And with the final season of the show airing right now, with the final book in the 9-part series out now, Leviathan Falls, thought it'd be a great time to ask Ty what readers and watchers question in this possibly most scientifically accurate of stories ever. Apparently, many readers and watchers have a problem with the possible unintended consequences of firing bullets, projectiles, and railguns in space. Why are they so concerned? Well, I could go through all of the physics and all the no drag and all that in space, or I could let my favorite video game speech of all time, one of them, do it for me.
Sir Isaac Newton is the deadliest son of a bitch in space. Now, Serviceman Burnside, what is Newton's first law?
Sir, an object in motion stays in motion, sir.
No credit for partial answers, maggot.
Sir, unless acted on by an outside force, sir.
Damn straight! I dare to assume you ignorant jackasses know that space is empty. Once you fire this hunk of metal, it keeps going till it hits something. That can be a ship, or the planet behind that ship. It might go off into deep space and hit somebody else in 10,000 years. If you pull the trigger on this, you are ruining someone's day, somewhere and sometime. That is why you check your damn targets. That is why you wait for the computer to give you a damn firing solution. That is why, Serviceman Chung, we do not eyeball it. This is a weapon of mass destruction. You are not a cowboy shooting from the hip. Sir, yes, sir.
Ah, Pizza Chef. A true hard sci-fi classic speech. Now, everything that NPC just said is scientifically accurate, except that character is implicitly assuming that any rogue projectile will definitely hit something eventually. Now, if that were indeed always the case, you could see it posing a big legality issue. Do you know how much trouble we go through just to make sure we can't be held accountable for destroying possible microbes on a possible planet, possibly somewhere sometime? Yeah, well now imagine all the hoops you'd have to legally jump through to ensure that you don't hit someone in the face with a projectile with a nuclear bomb's worth of energy behind it. Yeah, I don't want to be held accountable for that. But we must now question the NPC's logic. Will a rogue projectile randomly fired off into the void in the absence of gravity and air resistance always hit something eventually? Is that true? Well,
Ty Frank's ship has initiated a deceleration burn.
Okay, great. Just let Ty know that I'll be aboard the Rossi in just a minute. And that I'm keeping his cool plexiglass space phone until he puts me in one of his stories and or shows. Tell him that. Tell him. I'd like to quickly point out that the terrestrial version of today's question already has an answer. In most places on Earth, it is currently illegal to, in a celebratory way or recklessly, fire a gun into the sky. The reason, of course, is simple. These bullets traveling through the sky under the influence of gravity and air resistance will eventually fall back down to Earth. And when they do, they often hit someone or something. I've even seen studies from hospitals indicating that these falling bullets could in fact be more deadly than your typical gunshot wound because they are much more likely falling out of the sky to hit someone in the head. The important variable here seems to be the density of potential targets in some volume. Is it likely that as a bullet travels some distance, it will hit something in the volume that it is traveling? For example, think about the difference between firing into a crowded downtown area's sky, which sounds very legally, you should be held accountable for that, versus firing into the sky of the Siberian wilderness. That seems not as bad, right? Well, returning to our question, if humanity ever does return to space in a colonizing fashion, like the Expanse imagines, will firing a bullet recklessly or missing your target as Mass Effect outlines be like firing into a crowded downtown sky, or will it be as inconsequential as another snowflake in Siberia? Arya, send a tight beam to Ty. Let him know that I'm boarding the Rossi soon, and that the Rossi and the space phone are totally real, and that I'm keeping both of them. Bye-bye. Ty Frank, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today. Congratulations on the premiere of the final season of The Expanse. Number 2 on the New York Times bestseller list for Leviathan Falls. Thank you for being here, and I thought it would be interesting to try to figure out in real time what's the likelihood that an errant bullet or errant projectile fired from something like the Rocinante or what have you, what are the actual chances that it would go on forever and hit something? Even if it would stop in what we calculated before, but what are the actual chances it would hit something? And I wanted to try to calculate this with your input using something called the mean free path. And this is something that's used in particle physics, but basically it's how much stuff is in some volume and how quickly do you travel through that volume and how big are you? That should give you some indication of how far you can go on average before you hit something, you know. And my criteria for this, and we can adjust this to your specifications, but my criteria for this was if a random projectile that misses can go farther than the galaxy or farther than the solar system, without hitting anything, then it'd be very unlikely that it would be illegal even in a very more advanced civilization like is portrayed in The Expanse. Does that make sense to you?
It does, yeah. And I'm very excited by you doing this video, because every time somebody says, why are they just shooting their PDCs when they all hit something, I'm just going to link them your video from now on. So you're doing me a huge service here. You're helping me out.
It's perfect. Yeah, this all takes place canonically right before I die off screen. If you were writing a story where this was consequential, what would your cross-section of impact be? Now, by that I mean, what are you worried about hitting? If someone was coming to you and saying, like, okay, well, what would be the real issue?
Well, the first thing you're worried about hitting is another ship. You don't intend to. That's if the bullets that are fired do not achieve, solar escape velocity, that means they're going to settle into an orbit, right? And they're just going to orbit the sun for the next, however long. And if some hapless ship should wander through that orbit, now you've got this bullet whipping around the solar system that's just going to go right through your ship.
Yes.
I think less worrisome is planets, because these objects are small enough that even at the speeds they're traveling, if they hit an atmosphere, they're gonna burn up. And one of the things that's true in the show is that Mars' atmosphere is getting thicker and thicker as they go through their
terraforming.
As they go through their terraforming project. Now, there are plenty of places that have settlements like Luna, where there's big domes and people live under those domes, and there is no atmosphere. So obviously, 2 kilogram railgun slug slamming down through the dome of your lunar habitat's probably not good.
No,
I don't want that. But I think more than anything else, what people think about is ships.
Okay.
If you're just flying your ship around, are you just going to run into random bullets that were fired 12 years ago in some previous war?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I will say that when you're considering the cross-section here, the smaller it is, obviously, the less likely it is it's going to get hit, right? Just in general. Usually when... I was calculating this kind of thing. I started with like star-sized objects and then worked my way down to see how long it would take. Now, I think a good middle ground between something like accidentally hitting a star-sized object, which sounds likely, and a ship-sized object is maybe like a planet-sized target. I mean, if you're talking about things going into orbit, or you don't even want to get anywhere near some of these locations, right? I think a couple thousand, km in radius all around seems pretty safe to me, right?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, say something the size of like Ganymede.
Yes.
Which has no atmosphere, is covered with people living under domes, and would have a very bad day if a bunch of railgun rounds were raining down on them.
Okay, so Ganymede has a radius of 2,500 kilometers, which I think puts it like half of Earth's radius. So it's about half of the radius of Earth. So what then I would do is I would try to roughly estimate, very, very roughly, how many Ganymede-sized things are in, say, the galaxy. Galactic. I'm trying to give this the best chance of making your fans' point.
Right. So we're talking about bullets that have achieved solar escape velocity and are hurtling off through the galaxy the maximum number of chances to run into something bad?
I'm thinking like the worst case scenario, and if the worst case scenario, the free mean path gives you a distance, right? So if the worst case scenario gives you, you know, just a few thousand kilometers or something like that, a distance that a normal ship would be traveling in the expanse or something like that on a run, if the average randomly fired bullet or missed bullet is going to hit something every 10,000 kilometers, 1 million kilometers, something like that, that's bad, right? Yeah. Because you have a lot of things traveling those distances within that volume, and that would be bad, especially if you're firing hundreds, if not thousands of rounds, right? There are a lot of planets in the galaxy. There's 100 billion planets in the galaxy. But the galaxy, the Milky Way galaxy, is obviously quite big and voluminous, right? 8 trillion cubic light years. And if you know your orders of magnitude, which I'm sure you do, you already have a tingle in your head. They're like, okay, 100 billion versus 8 trillion cubed. I don't know if that's going to be exactly very dense with stuff. So if I put the Ganymede radius thing, how many of those Ganymede radius things are inside of a volume? How long, on average, would something have to travel before hitting something like that? And if I put that in, I get 3.3 times 10 to the 20 light years.
Is that a lot? Is that a big number?
Well, using Wolfram Alpha here, not a sponsor, to do all the conversions, I could divide all that by the diameter of the universe. Wow. So it's something like, you know, 600 million, by which I mean the average distance that something that size could travel before it hits something is 600 million times longer than the universe is wide. So it could make 300 million trips. A randomly fired projectile could make the equivalent of 300 million trips across the universe, or across, across this galaxy. I'm kind of mixing up values here, but yeah. If the whole universe had the density of planets that the Milky Way does, you could travel across it millions of times without hitting anything ever. And
there's some caveats there, right? Because
yes.
That is not including things like gravity wells tending to pull objects toward things, right? That sort of leaves that out of the equation, I would guess.
That
doesn't surprise me, because I read my Douglas Adams, and in Douglas Adams 13:4 in the Holy Script, it says space is big.
Space is quite
really,
big.
Really big. And so, you know, like whenever people talk about things randomly happening in space, my first answer is always to quote from the Holy Scripture of Douglas Adams. Saying, yeah. It's so much bigger than you think it is.
So much. And that's kind of what I want to get at with this whole discussion. You know, just the title, The Expanse. I don't think people really grasp the enormity of it, right? I mean, even if I bump up the size of objects here that you don't want to hit, basically I'm just making the targets bigger, to the size of the sun, it could still travel across the entire universe 150,000 times before hitting anything. Now, the gravity well thing is uber complicated. There's
no way to include.
There's probably not an average thing, but what I would say, it seems contextual, right? Where I could see that if in a vacuum, if you pick a truly random direction in space, your chances of hitting a planet or getting near a planet are similarly minuscule. But in something like The Expanse, if you are fighting near and around planets, and you're almost always in that vicinity, then being captured by orbit seems very likely, right?
And I think that's I think the answer to the question the fans are asking is, if you bring this down to just the volume of our solar system, and you take objects that will never achieve solar escape velocity, so they will settle into an orbit in our solar system. How long can they just orbit around the sun in our solar system and never hit a ship-sized object?
It gets complicated in that now you have, like, instead of a general volume of stuff, you have like some corridor, right? Some like tube. If they're moving around a radius or around a circumference, now you have what stuff are in that circumference. But if the other things are moving at a similar speed as everything else,
right?
I mean, if the ships are, if they want to say land near one of the outer planets or whatever, you're going to need to match these orbital velocities anyway.
That's right.
And then the relative velocity between you and one of these projectiles could be quite low, you know?
Yes.
It'd be like rendezvousing with another ship. So it gets... Obviously, this gets as complicated as we want, but I think that the takeaway is that space is so unbelievably large that to get it to like should firing weapons in this way, like The Expanse does, for example, should it be illegal? I think the colonization or the how many ships and bullets and things you would have to have firing all the time forever, it just seems not very likely to me.
That was our sort of back of the napkin guess, that it's very, very, very unlikely. But Daniel and I are notoriously bad at math. So that's why we needed to bring in an expert like yourself to look at this. But you know, the reality is, I think most rounds are not going to achieve solar escape velocity. They're not fast enough.
No.
So they are going to settle into an orbit somewhere. You know, which will depend on the speed they were traveling and the angle and all that, where their orbit winds up.
Yeah, or they could be flung out of the solar system for all. I mean, even if they're not achieving escape velocity, they could be on one of these unstable orbits. They just get slingshot somewhere else, and it's, you know.
Right. Or if they're going fast enough, the orbit they wind up at could be quite a ways outside a high traffic area, for sure.
Probably every single one of these orbits, even if it gets captured around a planet or whatever, in the best case, are going to be decaying orbits, and they're going to tumble into the atmosphere and never hit a ship ever anyway, right? I mean, without any controlling burns or whatever, like lifting up the belter ship on Illis to make sure it's not decaying into the atmosphere or something like that. Bullets don't have that kind of assistance, right? So thank you so much for helping me go through some of this and answering questions and bringing up even more questions than I ever thought about. It's too late for me to be in season 6, right?
It is too late, but let me tell you this: when you finally write your sci-fi story, or your sci-fi book, with all of your rigor and calculations in it, I will totally option that story and turn it into something.
Yay! Long hair, unite! I love it. Thank you, Ty, so much for your time. Congratulations on the best-selling book, the last season of my favorite show on television. I hope to talk to you soon.
Thanks, man.
Bye-bye.
Now exiting the facility.
Thank you so much to the very nerdy staff at the facility for their direct and substantial support in the creation of this here video. Today especially, I want to recognize research assistant Gary Verda and visiting scholar Dominique Giambattista. If you want to join the facility, if you want to drape on a silky white lab coat, talk to me every day on
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Pointless Top 10, a show where we make top 10 lists out of pointless things. Why we're flying by a pointless statue in Booty Bay? Because inside pointless things are treasure. Let's begin. 10. Number 10 is the fact that the Temple of Encourage is actually shaped like a giant scarab beetle. So if you fly all the way up into the sky and do a top-down view of the actual Temple of Encourage, you'll see it's actually shaped like a scarab. Like, look at that. It's got all the little legs. It's got the carapace or whatever it's called. I don't know enough about beetles, but I know that that's a thing. And I genuinely never even knew this. Like, I think it's just always been like this, and it's crazy because you go there all the time, right? It's almost one of those things where you never look up at the ceiling. Well, you never really fly all the way up and look directly down at the Temple of Encourage, right?
Lol. Så har jeg været rundt over det hele. Og så er den lige deroppe. Ha! Where's Super Mario now? Fuck Marina and you. Ha!
What can I help you with? Be safe. Brawl Hall. May your blades never dull. Loktar. Go forth to victory.
Can I help?
And I mean, they designed this in vanilla WoW, where nobody could go all the way up and fly around and see stuff like that. So, I mean, maybe you could see it on the mini-map. I saw some people say they saw it on the mini-map, or maybe you could just kind of piece it together. Like, this place kind of looks like a scarab, but I think it's really cool they designed it like that, because they could have just thrown it together back then and been like, whatever, nobody's going to look at it from the outside anyway. But they did, and it's pretty neat, especially all these years later. So that's why it's number 10. 9. Number 9 is an interesting one because I always remember questing around the furbolgs or the furblogs. I used to call them furblogs, but that's not what they're called. And I'd always see them standing by these logs, and I was like, what are these big logs? And then I realized it's their home.
Glory to the Horde. Strength and honor. Strength and honor. Speak. Speak, friend.
Sug. Strength. Loktar. What are you looking for? Strength and honor. Go with honor. Blood and thunder. Strength and honor. What are you looking for?
So I was like, oh, okay, that's pretty cool, but you never really got to see inside. But there is one home that allows you to look inside and see what these logs are like. So in Felpaw Village in Felwood, if you go all the way to the northwestern part of the village, there is this little area with a patio porch type of area, and it allows you to go in through the side of the house. And it's actually very cozy. There's like a soup or a stew being cooked up in the cauldron. There's some plants all around. He's got some swift thistle and like various herbs. There's a beehive. It's genuinely a cozy place. And this is a very Grizzly Hills aesthetic type of house. So I think what happened was they made the Wrath of the Lich King Furbolg areas, and then when they went to Cataclysm, when they were redoing some of this Furbolg stuff, they were like, hey, you know what? Let's just make one of these houses with the assets we already have into a Grizzly Hills type of Furbolg house. So that's what I think happened, but I love it. So that's why It's number 9. 8. Number 8 are the Gardener's Apprentices in Valdrakken, and this is kind of tucked away in an area of Valdrakken that I never really went to, so I think that's why I didn't realize this, but I love these guys. The one is this little guy, he's following the other around with a rake, so he's learning how to do whatever the other guy's doing. I don't know if that's how you rake around here, but he's just like swinging that thing and hitting stuff. All right. But my favorite is this little guy with the watering can, and he just keeps watering this plant, which I think he's giving it a little too much water, but who knows? I'm not a gardener apprentice. What do I know? But if you click on him, he will actually turn towards you and start watering you and give you the watering buff, which gives you a 15%